Today's stories include even more updates on WB Games and Wonder Woman, the Nemesis System patent expiring in 2036, and 10 games are taking up all the money. We'll have all this and more because this is Kinda Funny Games Daily. Welcome, gamers. This is Kinda Funny Games Daily for Wednesday, February 26, 2025. I'm the Nitro Rifle, Andy Cortez, and I'm joined by the Lock, Roger Picorni.
Happy to be here.
Good morning, Roger.
Big day.
Big day.
Big day.
A lot of news, a lot of things we got to get to. You know, we do the show each and every weekday. We run you through the nerd news topics you need to know about live on YouTube, Twitch, and podcast services around the globe. If you love what we do, support us with the Kinda Funny membership on Patreon, YouTube, and now Spotify and Apple Podcasts to get all of our shows ad-free. Watch us record them live and get a daily exclusive show. And for a chance to be a part of the show, submit your thoughts and opinions as YouTube super chats as we go. Remember, we're a small little business. We're a little baby business. We need your help to kind of keep the lights and the mics on. 11-person's business, all about live talk shows. Today, after Kinda Funny Games Daily, you'll get the Gamescast, where the topic is very much on topic. How would we save WB Games?
Yeah.
And the stream afterwards, really big stuff. We're returning to Bless's Dark Souls playthrough.
On the big set.
On the big set.
Ooh.
Very excited about
Going
that.
extreme.
Snowbike Mike will be here. You know what?
Maybe.
I don't want to admit that I'll miss him, but I miss him a little bit, Roger.
Just a little bit?
Just a little bit.
Just a little bit.
I miss the guy. If you're a Kinda Funny member, you can get today's Greg Way, and you can get Alien vs. Predator in review this afternoon. We're talking about Predator 2. Danny boy. You want some candy? God, what a movie. What a disaster that movie is. Can't wait to talk about that. Thank you to our Patreon producers, Delaney Twining, Carl Jacobs, Omega Buster, and Karen Lidner. Today, we are brought to you by Greg Miller's live Chicago show and BetterHelp, but we'll tell you about that later. For now, let's begin what is and forever will be the Roper Report. It's time for some news. We have 5 stories today.
A baker's dozen.
And we had 5 stories, but before we get into the actual real stuff, Greg Miller, come on to the set. Come join us. CEO Greg Miller.
Yeah.
CEO Greg Miller.
Hello, everybody. It's me, Greg Miller. How are you guys doing?
He's not getting a $23 billion bonus or whatever.
I'm not, unless you go to patreon.com/kindafunny right now. Money where your mouth is. Imagine the last 24 hours for Greg Miller, the biggest DC Comics fan y'all know, all right? I get to hang out. I get to see my friends. I get to come to work, be great. And then guess what? Jason Schreier comes in, he rips away my heart and soul. He says WB Games getting rid of Monolith, getting rid of this Wonder Woman game, right? A whole bunch of other shakeups over there. That leads to me running away from Tim Geddes. I'm supposed to be working on these split fiction videos with him, right? Run away from that. Run out here, do a Gamescast where I just rant and rave and whatever. Then I'm like, I can finally put it behind me. I can start healing. But then you're like, we should do a great Gamescast today where we save WB Games. I'm like, yes, we should. We're going to do that. And I'm like, well, I'll have that morning block, that 10 to 11, to do email, to plan the show, to have a great time. Wake up, Ben says something, I push him out of the way, I look at my phone as I do as a dad, go to Blue Sky, and what do I find in my
Daddy,
DMs?
I'm hungry.
Get out of here, I'm working, Ben! Open Blue Sky in my DMs, and I find a DM from the one, the only, Jason Schreier, who says, hey, could I come on Games Daily to talk to you and answer some of your all's questions about this WB thing? And I said, yes, because we were wrong or because there's something. He's like, no. I'm like, okay, great. So please welcome to the show, the one, the only Bloomberg's Jason Schreier. Woo!
Hello,
Jason.
I like that I get one of these like square boxes. Like, what was that, like 80s? Was there a show or a movie where like their people were in these little
Brady
square
Bunch?
things?
I mean, Hollywood Squares, but they were in person.
Brady Bunch. No, it was like a sci-fi show where like the people were like captured in these little squares. I don't know. Someone else.
Phantom Zone, Superman.
I'm thinking of that Michael Jackson video where they're doing that thing. You know, they're looking left
that
and
was
right.
very
That was
different.
one.
Black,
different thing.
You're black,
Black,
you're
you're
white,
white. Yeah.
you know it.
Anyway,
Jason, welcome to this. I don't know why you wanted to be.
That's a different song.
Is it? I thought it was. Was that another same one?
You're singing Who's Bad? You're black. Who's bad? You know it. You know.
So how does you're black or white
Doesn't
go?
matter if you're black or
Oh,
white.
that's a good one. Yeah. Is that the one where he turned into a panther too in the middle of it? I'll never forget. Fox
shit.
premiered that on just regular TV, and I was eating this cake my mom made. Jason, how are you?
Did you know that Michael Jackson stole a song from Weird Al, and Weird Al came up with this great hit called "Eat It," and then Michael Jackson was like, "Oh, I'm gonna take that and make
fucked
Beat
up.
It."
Don't get me started on the Beatles either. Jason, how are you? Of course, breaking news left and right. How you feeling?
Yeah, man. I was in the middle of an interview with someone yesterday and happened to see on my phone, like getting a couple texts that were like, hey, Warner Brothers just shut down Monolith and canceled Wonder Woman. And I was like, sorry, person I'm interviewing, can we reschedule this? So I like had to cut off the middle of the interview, rescheduled it for today. And then I rescheduled it again because I was like, I want to come on Games Daily and talk to these guys about Warner Brothers. Because there's a lot of stuff that I feel like maybe context that people should have or clarity about the situation that people don't have. I mean, just to give you an example, and this is just like one of many things that I've been thinking of. A lot of people are like, oh, fucking David Zaslav ruining everything. Like, I can't believe Zaslav is doing more tax cuts, blowing up his games business. But like Zaslav has nothing to do with this. This is the result. What happened yesterday and what has happened recently is a result of decisions that have been made since long before Zaslav took over. Like when Zaslav took over in April 2022, which is when he became CEO of Warner Brothers Discovery, Monolith by that point had already gone 4.5 years without releasing a game and lost all of its leadership group. So this stuff has nothing to do with Zaslav. It's kind of this history. If you have to look at the last decade of Warner Brothers to understand why and how a lot of this stuff has been happening.
Do you think so? I understand that. Is it still right to just blame leadership in general for WB Interactive? Right? Where is the reason Monolith isn't getting anything out is because everybody's getting in the way of it?
Yeah. So, okay. So, I think maybe the best way to do this is we can kind of go studio by studio, but I want to answer any questions you guys have because I know you had some lingering questions.
This is awesome. I hope you brought a PowerPoint.
I have a PowerPoint. It's like, so we're going to make, the next Destiny. It's going to be Destiny. Wait, oh shit. Different PowerPoint. Yeah. So Warner Brothers Interactive, for about 10 years, from 2015 on, it was run by a guy named David Haddad, who Warner Brothers announced last month that he's going to be stepping down because shit has hit the fan. But for about 10 years, David Haddad ran that studio. And when he took over WB Interactive in the games division, he inherited this thriving publisher. Arkham Knight had just come out or was about to come out. They were really firing on all cylinders. Mortal Kombat was doing really well. They had a lot of stuff going for them. And over the last decade, they've gone in the like complete opposite direction. And we've seen a lot of these studios flounder. Now 3 of them are shut down. We've seen a lot of these game franchises go nowhere. We've seen companies like Rocksteady making games that nobody wanted. We've seen companies like WB Montreal kind of struggling to get pitches off the ground. And it's really just been a disastrous few years. And the only reason I think that Haddad kind of survived 10 years is because Hogwarts Legacy came out and did such big numbers. It was such an anomaly that it saved his job for a couple more years. But yeah, I mean, his tenure has not been great. And a lot of people I've spoken to who have worked with him describe it as like this kind of classic executive indecision and refusal to make calls because making calls means exposing yourself to risk. And if you make calls and expose yourself to risk, then you lose your cushy job and it's better to stay seated. And this is also under the landscape of Warner Brothers having all this corporate turmoil. So Warner Brothers was like AT&T and Time Warner merged, and then that didn't work out, and then Warner Brothers got split out under Discovery, and this whole time there were rumors that the games division was for sale. So it's really just a mess from the top on down, and I imagine it was very difficult for any executive to succeed in that situation. But yes, a lot of people point the finger, and I think it's fair to, at Haddad for everything that has happened and everything that happened yesterday.
Had you heard the same rumor that they were trying to sell off these things, but not the IP and then license them back and yada da da da?
Yeah, that was all public. I mean, that was never going to happen. Like, nobody is going to buy. Like, why would anyone buy Rocksteady just to then have to pay, like, to license the Batman IP from Warner? Like, it makes no sense because by buying a studio, it's not just that you're dishing out money, however many hundreds of millions of dollars to buy the studio. You then have to pay all those salaries. And I saw this being discussed yesterday when people were like, why didn't Warner Brothers just sell Monolith instead of shutting it down? It's because no one wants to buy an expensive studio in Seattle, pay those salaries, and then have to start from scratch on a new IP or like license Wonder Woman and pay those fees. None of the math doesn't make sense there. So yes, Warner Brothers was always kind of like in this intractable position. They were never going to sell, other than I think they sold one mobile Playdemic. It was their mobile division, but the rest of it, I mean, no, they were never going to sell it.
Okay.
Is
Continue.
is it just a situation, Jason, where these people making these decisions don't really want to be in this business? It just feels like it's it seems like a lot of people up top that you were mentioning that are too scared to make the call or to take a risk like that. It feels like they're kind of not in the, I guess, right line of business. It's like they came from a different division. They're like, oh, I don't know shit about games. I'm not really willing to make a call on any of this.
I think part of Haddad and his crew, I mean, some of them came from other businesses. He had been at, I believe he was at Vivendi before Warner Brothers, and before that, he just kind of bounced around toy and entertainment companies, and before that, Harvard Business School. I think the MBA approach is very much to just kind of avoid making decisions as much as possible. Because, yeah, I mean, when you maintain the status quo, especially in a position of like corporate turmoil where you want to be in your chair when all of the dust is settled, and like you want to be in making that sweet, sweet executive money for as long as possible, making risky calls and putting big money into things can make you a target. You have to be the person who's like justifying to your bosses why you decided to greenlight this whatever and give them $100 million to do whatever. Of course, if you don't make calls, you're still burning through tons and tons of money because you're just paying people salaries to like do very little or do nothing and accomplish nothing. But that is seen as less risky than actually making the calls. And that's just one part of this, right? There's also a lot of trend chasing. There's also a lot of just kind of lack of vision, I would say, for a games division and what that would look like. So yeah, I mean, let me get into Monolith, right? Because Monolith is the big story of this week. Monolith just shut down. That is like the big story here. I want to talk about exactly what happened to Monolith, because I think there's some context that maybe not everybody has. So Monolith has been around for 30 years, 31 years, I believe it lasted until yesterday, making a whole lot of cult classic games, Fear, No One Lives Forever. But really, in 2014, they had their breakout hit, which was Middle Earth, Shadow of Mordor, and that was by far their most successful game. It was critically acclaimed. I think it was like nominated for Game of the Year. That game did really well. They made a sequel, Shadow of War, which didn't do quite as well because people were not fans of the loot boxes. That's a whole nother story. That game comes out.
I forgot all about that being a part of that. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, that's, I mean, talk about trend chasing, right? It was like, man, loot boxes are cool. Let's stick them in this game that like has no need for loot boxes. It was very strange. And they removed them like 6 months later. They were like, oh shit, this is a bad idea. We're just going to pull them out. Though. So after Shadow of War, they decide we don't want to do another one. So instead, we want to do a new IP. And the whole leadership group gets together. They start working on this new IP. It's codenamed Legacy. The idea is it's going to be like a procedural narrative sort of thing, kind of experimenting with some of the ideas they explored with the Nemesis system and that procedural story generation. And they spend about 3 years working on this. And during this time, and here is where you get the crux of the like refusal to make decisions. During this time, it's kind of clear to people at Warner Brothers in Burbank and their HQ that like this game isn't going to happen because Warner Brothers as an institution is not interested in new IP. They want to have their game studios working on their big franchises, superhero games, Game of Thrones, Harry Potter, etc., Mortal Kombat. But here Monolith is spending all this time trying to make a new IP. And there's a lot of just kind of like, it's almost like a standoff between the two parties where like Warner Brothers knows they're not going to allow this to happen. Monolith has a lot of sway and a lot of clout because you have these guys who have been working on these games for a while, had a lot of success with the Middle Earth games, and so they feel like they have the autonomy and the clout to be able to do what they want. There are some attempts here and there to kind of like squeeze IPs into this legacy, this game that they're making. Doesn't quite work out, and it really.
Do you know what IPs they were trying to put in? Do you know what IPs they were trying to put in?
I don't know exactly. I mean, I think they tried like on paper experimenting with as many as they like all of them. I mean, just trying to figure out like, can we graft this onto it? And it didn't work. again, we're talking about 3 years here. So it went through a lot of different iterations. This was a new IP. New IP always takes a long time. But people there, I mean, they were excited about it looking beautiful and it having cool procedural narrative ideas. I don't know if it would have ever worked, but that's what they were doing, right? Cut to 2021. I believe it was the spring of that year, maybe like March, April, something like that. But around then, finally word comes down, hey, this is not going to happen. And it was a lot of stringing people along. A lot of different people at different levels were told, like, maybe there's a chance of this, maybe not. Is this going to happen? I don't know. Quick digression here. I don't know about you guys, but I recently, like within the past few years, I've had some experience kind of pitching things to Hollywood executives, people at the Hollywood streaming networks and whatnot.
We have
HBOs
not
and
had that
Netflix
experience.
Okay.
No. Gary
I
Whitta
don't know if
comes
you
in and
guys are out
complains
there
a lot, but
pitching.
that's about it. That's all I know.
I don't know if you guys are out there pitching a kind of funny show,
We
but
should be.
did
Greg,
you guys have that?
Greg, Greg pitched to John Drake Small Watto.
Yeah,
Or
I'm
what if
trying to get
Watto was
Small Watto
small?
video game off the ground.
Yeah.
alive.
Okay. Well, Drake, he's the one to go to. He'll
Yeah.
he'll greenlight everything. Yeah. So what happens when you're pitching Hollywood? It's really bizarre. They do this thing called the Hollywood No, which is like they say on these meetings in these rooms, they're like, I fucking love it. Like, this is awesome. Let's keep chatting. Can't wait to work with you. And then you just never hear from them again. And that I feel like is a lot of what that culture was kind of very much in place in Burbank at WB Games, because there was a lot of just kind of, especially on this Monolith project, a lot of like just months and months and months of dragging things out, or like meetings. It was described to me as like people at a high level would go to these meetings with people at Warner, and they would leave the room and just like say to each other, like, what just happened in that meeting? Like, was anything actually decided or figured out, or was it all just like platitudes? And that's kind of what this is like, what it's like working with this regime at Warner. And it was very frustrating for a lot of people. So anyway, cut to April 2021. Legacy is canceled, and Monolith's leadership team, the entire leadership team, quits. Every single director. I put this on Blue Sky. Maybe you can screen cap this. But I put this on Blue Sky.
It'll break Barrett's amazing formatting of all of us, but yeah, we can.
Yeah, right. Just put it, but make another box.
It's easy.
Yeah, let's do that real quick.
You got Small Watto down there. Put a web browser on Barrett. You're killing it, Barrett. We know we're throwing a lot. There's Barrett already up there, killing it. Hold your phone up to your camera, Barrett.
So Monolith's entire leadership team, if you look at the Moby games for Shadow of War, you'll see this leadership group. It's 7 people. They're directors. All 7 of those people left the studio when Legacy was canceled. I believe 5 or 6 of them would then go on to start a new company called Cliffhanger Games, which is under EA, and they are currently working on the Black Panther game for EA.
Oh, okay.
So this is
Another
also
game I'm sure we'll never see.
Wow, that's I'll save that for a future.
We'll see you in 2 weeks.
I have no idea what's going on back there. But okay, so they all leave, right? And so this is also around the time, so like mid 2021. This is also around the time when Monolith is given Wonder Woman. Like basically the decision is made, and I don't know exactly who made the call, but it's very clear that Warner Brothers isn't interested in new IP, and so Monolith winds up taking Wonder Woman and deciding we're going to make a Wonder Woman game. And by the way, if you look at the timing of this, so this is spring 2021, the Wonder Woman game is announced in December of 2021. You guys might remember I mentioned on Kind of Funny Games Daily, I think around Game Awards time a few months ago, I was like, when Wonder Woman was announced, like that was nothing. Like literally, I mean, if you look at the timeline here, they start working on this game, or they take over this game in April, May, June-ish of 2021. They announce it 6 months later, which I think that probably happened for a lot of reasons. But one of the reasons was like, hey, like Warner, we need to light a fire because we need to actually get something shipped here, because Monolith hasn't actually shipped anything in 4 years now, and they're starting from scratch. But here's the thing that happens also is that in addition to having to start from scratch on this Wonder Woman project, which by the way, I think, well, I'll get into the kind of the tech of it all in a second. But in addition to having to start from scratch on this Wonder Woman project and just basically start a new game, they also no longer have their studio leadership. So they also have to rebuild their studio. And then it's not just the directors too, like a bunch of other people under them wind up going to Cliffhanger 2 and leaving Monolith, and Monolith is essentially eviscerated at this point, and they have to spend a lot of time rebuilding. And there are a lot of good people remaining there. A lot of people speak really highly of this guy David Hewitt, who took over as the studio head of Monolith, and I believe was still there up until the end. But still, I mean, under any circumstances, like rebuilding a studio to that extent alone can take years, but trying to do that while making a game is like next to impossible. Like, imagine if tomorrow all of Kinda Funny's leadership quit. I mean, maybe that would be a good thing.
Best thing that could happen to this place.
But like imagine having to like work on projects while trying to rebuild your studio and like rebuild your company at the same time. It is crazy.
Yeah.
And that's what they had to do. It was an impossible situation. By the way, this we're still in the timeline. We're still 2021. So again, a year before Zaslav even took over, a year before WB Discovery even happened.
So when you mentioned them showing off that little tiny trailer at Game Awards, that's like the most extreme form of, whenever people always complain, why are you showing this so early? It's like, well, people do this for recruiting and to try to get new. But this is like the most extreme form of that, where it's like, we don't have anybody here really.
Yeah, it was like, we need to recruit desperately. Also, we need to have something announced because like that'll help us. A lot of times if a game studio has something announced, like it can help prevent cancellation a little bit. Obviously didn't in this case, but certainly gave them a little more time than they might have if the game was never announced or something like that. So yeah, and then there's also this tech issue, which I won't get into the specifics in part because I don't actually know them all, but like my understanding is that there was a debate, are we going to stick with our like internal studio tech, or are we going to use Unreal Engine? And they wound up sticking with the internal studio tech, but the loss of some of their kind of engineering talent that had been around for years and years and helped make that tech made it a lot trickier to do that, even though I'm sure it also had its advantages when you have like a tech that has really good tools or a good editor or whatever else it is, you want to stick with that. But yeah, that was also would lead to some problems over the next few years as well. So they're working on this game, trying to rebuild their studio at the same time, really, really difficult. And they go through a lot. And then the game is essentially rebooted. They switched directors. I believe this is like beginning of last year or end of 2023. So close to the time when Greg Miller, insider extraordinaire, said that he heard that it was in trouble. Do you have
any idea of how, I know you said it was rebooted, but do you know like a percentage of how much in development the game was before it got rebooted?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard. None of this is linear, right? And it's always kind of like an amorphous thing. But I will say the main thing that was rebooted, from my understanding, is that the Nemesis system, they had been playing around with this idea originally that Wonder Woman would have a Nemesis system where like you befriend people and then it's like the Nemesis system in reverse, where like they become your allies. And they were playing around with how to make that work, which is like very in theme with Wonder Woman and so on. And it wasn't
so woke. Everybody's got to be friends.
I was waiting. They rebooted. They were working on Wonder Man. Right. Out of this.
Well, kindness is woke.
So that's true.
Yeah, and then they rebooted it to be more of a kind of God of War style, more traditional action adventure game. But by then, I mean, it was kind of too late, especially because last year was so bad for the Warner Brothers organization. Last year, Suicide Squad was a humongous flop. They wrote off $200 million because of that. Multiverses and Quidditch Champions also both flopped, wrote off another $100 million because of that. Last year was so bad that is essentially what led to Warner Brothers ousting Haddad and then everything that has just happened. And so, yeah, that's kind of what led us to today. I had been hearing for a while, for at least the last couple of months, that Wonder Woman was almost certainly getting canceled. I alluded to it in the story that I ran a few weeks ago about Warner Brothers and Haddad's regime. I think I said a couple times that the fate in that article that the fate of that game was in question. In fact, JB Perrette, who I'll get to in a second, but he's the big boss of the games division, he had been saying that like we're going to focus on these big franchises, and one of them, the main ones are, I think it's Harry Potter, Game of Thrones, Mortal Kombat, and then DC. But DC specifically Batman, he would mention. So he would be like, we're open to other ideas, but like specifically focus on that. So very clear that and Rocksteady is doing a new Batman game. I reported that a couple of weeks ago, but very, very early.
What
days
about
for that
Captain
one.
Boomerang? No, Batman.
Yeah, right. It's very. I mean, if you look at how we got here, it's all very wild. The fact, man, Suicide Squad, I could go on forever about that game. And the fact that you take a studio that is renowned and acclaimed for making these single player narrative action adventure games and put them on a multiplayer live shooter, that alone is just such a unfathomable misstep. But also going with the Suicide Squad is just crazy.
Nuts. Why do they keep trying? Stop.
It's
We
really,
don't care.
That's really
talk about fumble in the bag. You made Batman. You made the Arkham series. Just make these kind of games.
I think if it had the Slipknot guy from the movie.
Yeah, that would really push it forward.
Maybe.
Yeah. Jason, I want to ask, I know we're talking about Monolith, but player first games, right? That was something that them closing down, we heard about Multiverses, of course, ending support, right? But then them buying the studio 7 months ago and then shutting it down. Do you have any information on that, or what was the idea behind that?
Yeah. I'm trying to think. I mean, I've heard a couple of things secondhand that I don't feel super comfortable sharing publicly yet, but
That's a
I will
journalist
say
right
that in
there.
a
That's a
situation-
journalist.
I don't know. I often say things on this show and then they get aggregated.
Not this time.
No, I will say that in a case like that, when you have a studio acquisition that is kind of tied to the release of a game, sometimes the studio has some leverage in cases like that where it's kind of hey, if you want this to be a long-term relationship, if you want us to keep working on this game, assuming it's a success, let's put a ring on it. If you want it, then put a ring on it, and let's make this a long-term relationship, that sort of thing. And I imagine that something similar happened here, but I'm not 100% sure. But I do know that them buying player first was a bet that Multiverses was going to be a success, which they really thought it would be.
Didn't pan out, Roger.
Yeah, them
Snake
shutting it
eyes
down
on that
was-
bet.
Very much. Yeah, man. But I want to talk about the current kind of regime. So,
Well, hold on. I want to
David
stop you because you
Haddad
got a lot in the tank here. You want to talk about the other studios. I got questions about WB Montreal. You have all this up your sleeve, yeah?
I will get to that in a second.
Then
but
what I
wanna
want to
talk about
do,
just kind of-
I think we should do the ad break here is all I'm saying. Remind everybody, of course,
Okay.
we can only do cool stuff like this live.
I can advertise for Warner Brothers here. Warner Brothers, it's a great place to work.
Sounds like it. Pad your resume for 3 more months before it's all over. We couldn't do stuff like this. Have Jason run in here on our cool video wall without your support. We are Kinda Funny. We're all about live talk shows, and if you love that, we'd love you to pick up a Kinda Funny membership either on patreon.com/kindafunny, youtube.com/kindafunnygames, Apple or Spotify to get all of our shows ad-free, and of course get your daily dose of me, Greg Miller, in a series I call Greg Way. Right now you're not using your benefits, so here's a word from our sponsor. This episode is brought to you by me, Greg Miller. Chicago, what are you doing Thursday, April 10th at 7 p.m.? The answer? Coming to my live show. That's right, Mrs. Miller's baby boy is coming back to Chicagoland and putting on a 90-minute, one-night-only show live from the Goodwin Auditorium at Benedictine University in Lisle. I'm mixing a bit of Up at Noon with a bit of my best Comic-Con performances with a lot of my Chicago influences. I'm calling it a late night with Greg Miller, and it's going to offer never-before-heard adolescent tales, an interview with one of my favorite bands of all time, a conversation with Millie Ramsey about growing up in the internet spotlight, your live questions for me, and of course, tons of fabulous video game prizes. Get your tickets now at kindafunny.com/Chicago. And hey, Midwest people, we never do shows out there, so this is your chance to see a Greg Miller stage show. Indiana, Iowa, Minnesota, Wisconsin. We always talk about how we love to drive as Midwest people, so hit the road for an opportunity you may never get again. This is a fundraiser for Benedictine University. That's right, my childhood best friend Poe's school. So get your tickets now at kindafunny.com/Chicago, and I'll see you on April 10th. This episode is brought to you by BetterHelp. It's always important for us to be aware of a relationship red flags we should avoid. But what if we focused more on looking for green flags in friends and partners? If you're not sure what they look like, therapy can help you identify green flags, actively practice them in your relationships, and embody the green flag energy yourself. Some of our best friends use BetterHelp and love how helpful it can be for learning positive coping skills and how to set boundaries. It empowers you to be the best version of yourself. It isn't just for those who have experienced major trauma. If you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule, and it serves over 5 million people worldwide. Discover your relationship green flags with BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com/kindafunny to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/kindafunny, BetterHelp.com/kindafunny. And we're back. And gentlemen, I have breaking news for you.
Oh,
Greg, hit us with it.
We're officially switching this into the Kinda Funny Gamescast.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So if you've made it into this Gamescast long enough on your podcast feed saying, oh, they uploaded Games Daily, we didn't. We just are like, Jason's too good. We'll do Games Daily after this in the place of Kinda Funny Gamescast. So this is your Gamescast. Games Daily will happen after this. I digress. Jason, back to you. Keep
I just
telling me stories.
sabotaged the entire structure. Of
no,
Kinda
you made
Funny.
it.
No, yeah.
I don't know if you heard earlier when we were just ranting and raving about the cake my mom served me during Michael Jackson's. It's hard to derail this thing. Don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. You're killing it, Jason. Thank you so much for doing this with us.
Sure. Yeah. So let me just finish the thought real quick, and then I'll open it up to you guys to ask other questions or about the other studios, whatever. But so Haddad is gone. So in his place is this guy named JB Perrette, who is the head of games and streaming. And he, I think he's going to kind of slow down the search for a successor to be like the new president of WB Games. And I think he's going to take over and step in. And this is part of him being like, we need to return to profitability after an awful year. We're making these cuts. We're canceling this game. We're going to try to get refocus on all this other stuff. And from a kind of I've talked to him once. I talked to Perrette a few weeks ago. He strikes me as a smart guy, as a guy who knows what he's talking about. He talked a little bit when I was talking to him about like how game development is a non-linear process, and he's understood that and he understands that. And I was like, holy shit, like you're saying something that like most studio heads, like it took them 20 years to realize if they realized it at all. And you've been doing this for a year. And
hold on,
from what I've
time
heard from
out.
people.
I love how smart you are, and I love how smart we are. But so many people say, what is a non-linear process when it comes to games? What does that actually
just
mean?
Like meaning that like you would think that it's kind of like, I don't know, like writing a book or writing a script, or you just kind of like do things in order and they happen and you can kind of like holistically look at them, as opposed to game development where you might have fits and starts. You might work on features only to find that they're not actually fun and you have to like completely throw them out and they completely change how things work. Or like you build a level and then the combat system changes and so you have to redesign your entire level to account for the new combat system, that sort of stuff, where it's just all constantly changing all the time.
It's like us, I mean, you know.
Yes,
it's non-linear.
It's interesting.
Yeah.
I mean,
non-linear podcasting is what I call this.
It's funny. You could argue that like that is one of the reasons game development is so expensive, and maybe that's a problem. But that's a whole other different kind of funny games daily. Anyway, this guy JB who took over, he came in, made this fucking shitty, awful call to like cut a bunch of jobs, which is part of his like mandate to restore profitability, yada yada yada. But I do think there's like a little bit of ray of hope. I mean, I guess we'll see how he does taking over the role now. I've heard good things from people around him. People say he like asks the right questions. People are certainly higher on him than they were on Haddad. I think a lot of people all across the org, studio heads all across WB, are not exactly crying to see Haddad go, to see a regime change there. I think there was a lot of frustration towards him. And I do think there's like a vision of the future for W Games that looks pretty good. It just might take a few years before we actually get there.
Do you think they get enough time to get there?
Yeah, because like I don't see them doing this only to then just like double back and cut costs. I guess you never really know.
Yeah.
But like I think Zaslav, like as early as like recently as a year ago, was being like Hogwarts Legacy, holy shit, this is the future. Like I think they are interested in doubling down on games and really just kind of, they see games as a place of growth. And their strategy for doing that is to double down on the big franchises, which seems like a smart one. I guess we'll see what happens. I mean, Hogwarts Legacy was such an anomaly that if they're expecting all their other games to hit that level, they're in for a rude awakening.
Oh, but
Even,
when
like,
has an executive board ever had misplaced, sales expectations?
Yeah, even like Hogwarts Legacy 2, there's no way that it meets those same levels of expectations because the hunger for like a new Harry Potter game is so not there anymore. It's been satiated, but yeah, we'll see. We'll see.
Yeah, that was, I kept on bringing up that point yesterday on the Gamescast. It's like, that's the best and worst thing that could have happened to WB Games, I think. Like, it obviously made a shitload of money, 30 plus million copies. It was 30 million copies as of October of last year. So who knows where it's at now. But like now everybody thinks up top that like every game can do that. Now
Yeah.
all of our stuff
Yeah.
can do that. It's like, no, man, like Harry Potter is the people buying Harry Potter are the people that are also playing free to play Call of Duty and Fortnite, and those like there's such a massive fan base there that isn't necessarily going out to buy Uncharted 4.
Now we're
and
back to Matt Piscatella, right?
Exactly.
Talking about this 40% that play, this one game.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it's I get the sense that someone like Perret is smart enough to recognize that that's not going to happen, but I think their standards are going to be pretty high. Like these are all going to be big investments that they expect to be billion-dollar franchises or billion-dollar games. Like I don't think they are going to settle for like a game that sells 2 million copies. So we'll see what that looks like.
Okay. So that's the executive team. That's the Monolith stuff. But one thing I was wondering yesterday, you'd heard rumors that this Wonder Woman game would be canceled forever. Had they also been expecting the studio closure? Was this news to everyone yesterday?
Complete shock and surprise to everyone. I mean, it makes sense if you think about it. Like, here's a studio that is not really the same people that it was
Sure.
8 years ago when they released the last game. Hasn't released a game in that long. Would have to start from scratch on a new thing or be a support studio. Which, I mean, what is there to support at this point? You already have WB Montreal essentially being a support studio, so like it doesn't really make sense from a. Obviously, it's awful from a human level, but if
Sure.
you're looking at it just on paper, like from a sociopath executive level who has to make these decisions, it doesn't really make sense to keep them around if you're canceling the game. But no, as far as like I had heard not forever ago, really it was only within the last month or two, maybe 2 months ago, that I started hearing Wonder Woman was almost certainly going to get canceled. But no, as far as I know, like everybody was shocked that the studio was closed, especially a studio with a name with that kind of legacy attached to it.
Sure. So then talk to me about WB Montreal. You say they're
Sure.
basically a support studio. Where are we at with them? Where do you want to talk about their journey?
Yeah, man. So it's a long one. I mean, they have been around for a long time, since like 2010 or something like that. They came out with Arkham Origins, which I think some people appreciate, even though it was always kind of the black sheep of the Arkham games, the one that Rocksteady didn't want to talk about, like, and just wanted to focus on their own
Here's the Arkham trilogy. Another game.
Right? And then they had a bunch of false starts. So like after Origins, they were working on 2 games. They were working on a Suicide Squad game and a Damian Wayne game, and then both of those were canceled one after another. And then they had this new mandate of like do a service game and also reinvent Batman, like do a Batman game without Batman. Eventually the service stuff was kind of stripped out of that, and that is what became Gotham Knights. That's a game that I think had a trouble development, as they all do.
Do you know around-
for
do
all
you-
sorts of reasons?
Do you have any idea of like timeline wise what these mandates were given out and then maybe like pulled out of, hey, we're not doing that service stuff? Are we talking like 2019, 2018 ish?
So that game started development, Gotham Knights, in 2017, and that's when the mandate from Haddad and team was they used to use this this phrase called digitally powered, which was like before games as a service became the big term. That was it. It was like, how are we gonna like equip these games with long-term revenue plans and digital content drops and blah 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 blah.
It
blah.
sounds way more fun to their credit. Like, games as a service sounds very corporate-y, yeah.
Yeah, it does. But when you say digitally powered to like people who were at Warner at the time, they like get a shudder. They're like, oh, God, like, that brings back awful memories. And yeah, so I don't know exactly when it was kind of like when Gotham Knights ditched that. It was a couple years into development where it was like, hey, this is no longer the plan. Like we're gonna switch gears on this one. But that was a period of like big game as a service stuff. Which another thing, by the way, a lot of people have talked about how like in recent years, people like Zaslav and JB Perret are talking all about games as a service, but the games as a service mandate started long before that. And this is more executives just kind of like saying what shareholders want to hear, because if you look at their current slate of games, they're not games as a service. I mean, Hogwarts 2 is not going to be like a game as a service. Like Batman from Rocksteady is not going to be a game as a service. Wonder Woman wasn't going to be a game as a service. So the concerns, this is not a company that is like going all in on game as a service. They're going all in on those big franchises.
But is that
we'll see
because
if
they
that
touch the
works.
stove? Like they fuck around and find out kind of thing? Like they saw how the industry was going. They saw, I mean, with Suicide Squad, what happened?
No, I think they still believe that there's like room for success. Like I was talking to I've talked to executives there who talk about how like the there may be there is like they can envision a world where like you are playing in Hogwarts with your friends and you go hang out with your buddies in Hogwarts and you're all wizards together and taking classes together, and there's like they have these kind of fantasies in their heads about games as a service that might work. It's just that these particular projects that are currently in development, I'm sure they have a game of service at some point somewhere, but those are not them. They're also focusing on mobile, by the way. They're doing a lot of stuff in mobile that they hope will hit in a way that some of their other mobile games did not.
I cannot imagine the amount of times metaverse was thrown around at these at any of these meetings when you talk and you go with your friends to classes at Hogwarts. Like that sounds
I'm late
like
for my 9:30 potions class.
yeah, that sounds like such a like directive of we also need to be in this sphere. That's so
It's
sad.
so funny. It's so funny. But it's also, I mean, you could see that working, right? Like Hogwarts MMO. I remember there were Hogwarts like MUDs back in the day that were incredibly popular. People role playing in the Hogwarts universe. It's an appealing proposition for a lot of people, I think.
Yeah, that sounds really good, but then I also think about that could just be a Fortnite mode. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
I feel like that's the inevitable place where we're gonna go. Like, have you heard anything about that? Like, I know that James Gunn talked about how he wants to collaborate more with Fortnite in the future. Is that something that's on the table as maybe an alternative to what they're doing or what they were doing?
I don't know. I can't imagine it's a significant part of their revenue if it is.
Yeah.
So then for WB Montreal, obviously Gotham Knights doesn't do well. Where does that leave them?
Yeah, so they wound up in this kind of amorphous position, sort of like what happened to Monolith that I was mentioning earlier, where it was kind of this back and forth of like meeting after meeting and them trying to pitch things and never really getting a no, but not getting a yes either. Or it would be like, yeah, we're really excited about this. So are you going to give us a budget or a timeline? No, just like keep working on that. Like keep doing what you're doing. Like those are the conversations that people would have, which I imagine was infuriating for a lot of people. So WB Montreal after Gotham Knights, their original vision was like, hey, we know this isn't perfect, but we have all this tech, we have this team together, we have this chemistry. Why don't we do like a Miles Morales style, like 1.5 Gotham Knights game that really just kind of like takes out that stuff and like makes it a lot better. And that was canceled after the performance of Gotham Knights. So that was sad. It's really sad because like companies these days, maybe because budgets are so high, just don't give teams the opportunity to kind of learn from mistakes and make the kind of the Mass Effect 2 or the Uncharted 2 or the Assassin's Creed 2, like the game that really builds on the foundation and makes something really great.
Instead, we keep reliving this cycle, right? Where it's like all these former AAA devs leave the big company to go start their own thing, and they bite off more than they can chew. They make a game that is maybe a 7, and then they get closed. Their funding gets taken away, or Absurd Venture buys their entire studio. I don't know. Andy, you keep raising your hand.
Well, I wanted to bring up just the development of Gotham Knights, and it kind of reminds me of like the story of Veilguard, where it was going to be a games as a service game, and they had to sort of reinvent it and make it a single player RPG. Where, like, when we talk that this game was going to be a games as a service, are we talking Destiny style? And was there a whole lot of we have to reboot this project happening with Gotham Knights?
No, Dragon Age, they had to reboot a lot of things, and this they did not, because if you look at the structure of this game, I mean, it's already, when I say service, I mean, the idea was like, in Gotham Knights, you would still be teaming up with your friends multiplayer. It would be the same sort of game. It's just like for the year after development or the years after development, we would be releasing new boss packs and like
Battle
stuff that you would
passes.
do. It was just kind of like an ongoing
Okay.
content plan. So it's not like they drastically changed the game as far as I know.
It
I
sounds
think one of the most
digitally powered
difficult-
to me.
And
I think-
with that, like the way Gotham Knights is structured, it definitely is built to kind of have that. They just didn't do it, so that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, exactly. And then so after Gotham Knights, so 1.5 was canceled. They wound up pitching a Constantine game before realizing after months of pitching that like Burbank was never going to say yes to that and just kept dragging them along. They wound up I think Burbank, the people in WB, when I say Burbank, that essentially means WB Games corporate. I think they said like, hey, why don't you do something about on the Flash or Joker? And they picked the Flash and wound up working on that, but then that didn't happen. There was I think there was a belief from WB and Burbank that like WB Games Montreal had they couldn't be trusted to make new games after Gotham Knights was such a failure, and that they should become a support studio. And while some of these pitches were going on, a lot of the people from Montreal got put on Wonder Woman, and even some other games throughout the org. And so they essentially were turned into a support studio for WB. But Burbank didn't want to say that to the company. Like, they didn't want to say, like, hey, we're going to make you a support studio. So instead, they kept dangling like this idea that they could pitch something new. And I believe the current state of things is that they're pitching a new Game of Thrones game. So we'll see if that happens. Would be fun to see.
Who's pitching the Superman game over there, Jason? What the hell?
I feel like there has never been a Superman game. Like, maybe ages ago there was like a pitch deck of one, but I've never heard anything concrete about a Superman game actually happening there.
Why would you? He's kind of overrated.
Yeah.
All right, everybody.
And he's also like almost
Greg,
impossible to design around, because he's just way too overpowered. And
We
that
already
wouldn't
played
be a fun
Crackdown.
game. Yeah.
Yeah.
And like,
I remember
Superman
hearing-
64, like flying through rings, like how can you top that?
I remember hearing that like Rocksteady was adamantly opposed and was like, we will never make a Superman game. Like, we fucking hate Superman.
What are we, idiots?
That's incredible.
Greg looks so sad.
That's fair enough. That's fair enough. Okay.
Greg, do you remember years ago? I think we were at the JW and like the rumors of, oh man, I'm gonna put you on the spot. I'm gonna blow up your spot here.
Oh, shit.
Sorry in advance. But there were rumors about Superman floating around and them being tied to Rocksteady, and I ran into you and I was like, hey man, like, sorry, Rocksteady's not making Superman, and you were like, oh, I know, they're making Suicide Squad. I was like, wait a minute, you know more than you're letting on, Greg Miller. You're keeping some insider info to yourself.
Jason, I have so many secrets I don't even tell you.
All right, bro.
No,
How could you not tell me?
this is why I'm always so quick when people are like, oh, fucking games journalist. I'm like, I'm not. I'm not. I'm somewhere in between. I'm a pundit, a critic, an entertainer, or whatever.
Well,
yeah,
you're
know,
a CEO.
You know how much. Oh yeah, I'm a
executive.
dirtbag CEO.
Shareholders. I gotta satisfy the shareholder.
So much of
me.
what Kind of Funny does is infotainment. I don't know what you want to call it, right? But it is the idea that there's wrestling kayfabe all the time. So yeah, no. When I was wearing the Superman shirt, psyched at like I knew that Rocksteady was not making a Superman game. But the one thing you and I need to talk sometime privately, like we did at Dice, about like I have a multiple source. There was a Superman game in development in the past decade now. I'm old. You know what I mean? I'm talking about, like, I think I was at IGN when I originally heard this. And from two different people that I have full trust and belief in, but I've never heard anyone talk about it.
Which studio?
I can't say that. I don't want to say that publicly. But
Okay,
I'll tell you.
well,
I'll
we'll
tell
discuss.
you. Yeah, exactly.
Greg,
exactly,
I think we have lunch. I think we have lunch plans at GDC. We can discuss.
Yeah, we
at
do, but I
lunch.
had to move them because of this demo. I'll tell you later. We'll
Okay.
figure it out. I'll tell
we'll discuss.
my wife what to tell you about the Superman game, and you tell her what to
Okay.
tell about the Superman game. I'll be back to it.
Perfect.
Jason, I know we only have you for about 10 more minutes before you're hard out.
Yes.
What else do you
Yes.
need to cover? What else do you need to tell?
I have to get on a call with the person who I had to interrupt yesterday.
Tell them
because
we
of this
appreciate their sacrifice.
will.
We
I
appreciate
will.
them doing this for us.
I will.
What else is there to say about WB Games right now and where they're at?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, so Monolith is no more, Player First is no more, WB San Diego is no more. So they're definitely consolidating. I think I think they're man, with the overall industry vibes, there's no sense of security about anything or anyone, but I do think that like Rocksteady and WB Montreal and Avalanche, obviously some of these studios are in more secure places now as a result. Like the big cut just happened. I can't imagine there will be more cuts in the next year or so. But again, you never know with the games industry. But like as of right now, it seems like this is their big drastic move, and now they're going to see what the fruits of like this new strategy look like over the next couple of years. So there are reasons to be bullish about like the remaining lineup, but it's just so tragic and so sad that like all these people who worked at Monolith, some of whom had been and have now not shipped a game in 8 years and will not ship one for who knows how much longer because of this. And it's just so sad and tragic that all of these people are just kind of like swallowed into this corporate like drama
Grinder,
and it's just
yeah.
like
Yeah.
net like casualties of that. And yeah, it's just sad like having the wrong people in charge or people in charge who like don't make decisions or don't have a strong vision. it can just be so cataclysmic, and it's a hard job, man. It's like I was having drinks with someone at Dice who was like, have you ever thought about things from a publisher's perspective, from the perspective of someone who has to go through the spreadsheet and make the job cuts? And I was like, first of all, I'm a lot more sympathetic for the people who lose their jobs and have to worry about how to feed their families. But sure, I do have a little bit of sympathy for that position. It's a tough position to be in, but that's why you're paid $1 million a year to do it, is because you are trusted to run things in that role.
Yeah.
And so having the wrong people in charge for a really long time can just be so cataclysmic in so many ways.
100%.
I know how
And it's
tough
worth
it
noting.
is because Greg had to counterpick GTA 6 on our Fantasy Critic League. You know what I mean?
These are big boy decisions.
Tough decisions.
Yeah,
Tough decisions out there.
That
Absolute
is tough,
bummer.
especially because when it gets delayed, you're going to be like, damn.
No, that's what I want. I
Oh,
counterpicked
that's what you
it.
want. Oh,
I
okay,
counterpicked
okay.
it, so I don't
Oh,
want it.
Gotcha.
A better example is when Kevin comes over and he's like, "Hey, can we refill the kegerator?" And I'm like, "Ugh, how much is it?" I don't know if I want to. Of course, Andy and Roger, you have computers. I'd love to get super chats involved.
Yes.
Over here, CJ Splits on. No, it's already gone. I can't see it. Oh, there it is. Bander SN. I'm sorry. He said anything about TT Games. We didn't cover that.
Yes.
Jason, what's going on with TT Games? Obviously, I know Arthur Parsons and a whole bunch of them left. They went and made that Funko game that was not great, and I don't hear anything about the Lego franchise anymore from them.
Yeah, they actually are one of the few studios in the umbrella that has a game coming in the near future. They do have a Lego game coming.
Oh.
I believe it's for next year. I could be misremembering. It's either later this year or next year. I think next year. But yeah, there is a new Lego game coming. I won't blow up their spot and say what it is. But yes,
Fair
there's a new Lego game coming
excellent. Good.
imminently. There's also, by the way, there's like that Harry Potter definitive edition with DLC thing that is coming as well. So there are a couple of things. There's also that Game of Thrones like weird mobile game that was announced at the Game
That has
Awards.
like everybody in it. Yeah, we were all mentioning that casually
very
yesterday.
bizarre.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Jesus Shuttlesworth has a super chat asking about this rumored Batman Beyond game. Is it true? What can we?
Is that even in the cards?
Yeah, is
I
there
haven't
anything
even
in the
heard that
future?
rumor. What is the rumor exactly?
PlayStation exclusive Batman Beyond game. Part of their strategy to stay afloat. PlayStation would have to drop a bag.
That doesn't sound like a rumor.
I
That
don't
sounds
think
like
so.
a lot
That's
of,
him pitching. That's him pitching.
that sounds like people on Reddit really hoping.
Andy sources.
Listen, Jesus, know your place.
I mean, I know that. So I've said before, I reported a couple weeks ago, Rocksteady is making a Batman game, returning to their roots. I don't know exactly what it is. It's still pretty early days.
I was gonna say, did they know what it is yet at this point?
Yeah, it's like kind of, it's early. It's early days on that. But I worry a little bit about that because they're going to run into a similar problem that Monolith did, where they've lost a lot of leadership. And so Sefton Hill and Jamie Sefton and Jamie, the two
Founders, right?
founders of Rockstar, Jamie Walker and Sefton Hill, the two founders of Rocksteady, left and formed a new studio called 100 Star, and they've recruited some of their former colleagues. So there was some talent trained there, which, by the way, under Haddad's leadership, like we saw the directors of Monolith leave, founders of Rocksteady leave, a bunch of leadership in Montreal leave, like a lot of attrition at the level of people who had to work with
Ringing
Haddad,
endorsements.
which-
Of what the plan was over there.
I know it's very early on, Jason, in any of the James Gunn sort of conversations that we mentioned yesterday. What do you have any information as to how James Gunn would try to be involved in any WB Games development and any of what is happening with Rocksteady or WB
is he
Games?
even involved? Because when he was talking about stuff, it seemed like he was just kind of on the outset. Like they'd be like, "Oh, would you want to do a Marvel Rivals thing?" He's like, "Yeah, maybe." Like it didn't seem like he was that involved with the whole process.
I think that was, well, I don't know. I mean, I get the feeling that that's more about the headlines and the stories than it is what's actually happening on the ground. But I don't know. It would be happening with very narrow group of people. So it's possibly just hasn't trickled down to me. But I imagine it's more like a Gunn coming in and being like, hey, like story people, like here's what we're doing. Let's make sure that this is all canon or whatever. And let's make sure this all kind of syncs together. But this idea, it's always been a kind of flight of fancy to be like, we're going to have the DC verse and they're all going to be connected, the movies and the games, and that's never going to happen. The timelines are all just like completely different.
What if they introduce the multiverse? Then it works, and it's just that we all have our little. Yeah, exactly.
That's what you need, man.
We need more multiverses.
Everything in Fortnite.
Exactly.
Oh gosh. Do you have any anything to talk about regarding the Nemesis system?
Oh yeah.
I always have something to talk about. What do you mean regarding the patent?
Future plans, patent. I know, we've seen many people report that the Nemesis system is patented until 2036.
I was going to say it's coming up right in our next show, Games Daily. I think that's a
Right.
news story about the year when it expires.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I think that stuff is overblown. Because I don't know. A lot of that is tech, and you're not gonna recreate it somewhere else. But also, I don't really think many game developers are out there being like, we want to copy exactly what the Nemesis system does. Like, a lot of people have been playing around with procedural storytelling in different ways, but with or without a patent, I can't imagine a ton of AAA studios being like, we are going to make this exact same thing. And if they do something different that maybe experiments with similar ideas but feels different, then it wouldn't violate the patent. So I don't know. I think that story has been pretty overblown, is my gut.
A weird thing to patent a video game system.
It really is. Yeah.
It is, but man, if we had more time, I would go on and on about the patent trolling that led to the creation of essentially led to Bobby Kotick taking over Activision. Actually, go read Play Nice.
I was gonna say, I do know this from Play
Hear the
Nice, of
story
course.
about
I read it with my
that.
ears.
Oh,
wow.
Me
On
too.
Audible, yeah.
Me too.
Very good book.
As one does.
Very
But yeah,
good book.
patent trolling was Ralph Baer, who was the creator of the Magnavox Odyssey, was a notorious patent troll and won all these patent lawsuits for patenting sports games. Essentially, it's a pretty crazy part of video game history.
There it is.
There it is.
Play Nice, The
There it
Rise,
is.
Fall, and Future of Blizzard
a
Entertainment.
book.
Jason's latest book.
I
An
also
amazing
told-
read.
I also told Jason that I signed up for my third Bloomberg subscription.
Oh, nice.
Because I was
You
like,
just keep forgetting?
I was just like, no. I have two other running ones. I still think I got to look at Rocket Money to tell me how to which one to cancel. But yeah, I had to sign up for a third one yesterday. Had to get that article.
Can I just say, I tweet gift links to all of my articles on Blue Sky. Not on, I said tweet, but I don't use
Yeah.
Twitter anymore. Blue Sky I post gift links to all my articles. You can just read them for free there. You don't have to subscribe if you don't want to subscribe to Bloomberg. But I
happy to
appreciate it,
subscribe.
Andy.
Yeah, well, you're the go,
I'm going
Jason.
to tell my bosses that I got 3 subscriptions
Yeah.
all from one person.
Of course. Well, Jason, that's going to do it for us here. Thank you so much for all of your time and all of your patience with us. Sorry it took so long to get to your portion of it. We had to talk about, some Michael Jackson songs. It's very weird.
And I don't want you to leave empty-handed, Jason. I know you're always looking for scoops. You're looking for threads to tug on, all right? I don't know if you've heard about Stars in the Bank, all right? Now, we have a very successful game show here called Kinda Funny Game Showdown, and I do have Stars in the Bank, which will allow me to steal 3 stars from Tim. It's a developing storyline. I haven't seen Bloomberg cover it, So I'm just putting it out there. VGC's
you're
always
giving him
knocking.
the exclusive.
VGC's always knocking on my door. Jordan Middler always trying to get an interview. I'm like, I'm a Jason man, Middler.
Okay,
Get out
gotcha,
of here. So
gotcha.
just something you to think about.
Jason, you can ignore
Send
all
me
of
the
that.
tip. Send
Thank you.
the tip
Thank
to Mike at Bloomberg.net,
Got it.
and we'll check it out.
Thank you, Jason
Mikey B.
Schreier.
Thank you.
This has been the Kinda Funny Gamescast
It has been.
for,
See you guys.
for
Bye, buddy.
February 26th, 2025. We appreciate all of y'all. We will see you on Games Daily after this.